Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our Let's Talk seminars. We're talking property legal advice today. I'm delighted to be joined by Jess Cornish from Paddle & Cox. Jess is a senior commercial property solicitor at Paddle & Cox, who are a full-service commercial law firm. Jess has been qualified since 2011 and became a partner in the law firm by 2012 and remained so for many years when she decided very sensibly to have a more flexible way of balancing her career and family life and move to consultancy work. The great thing with Jess is she's got over 12 years experience in helping businesses with a variety of commercial legal work, and she now specialises in commercial and property investment portfolio transactions. On a family life, Jess very much enjoys living in Cornwall, is a fantastic solicitor and partner to many of our clients, and it's delightful to have you here. Welcome, Jess.
Thanks very much, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Good stuff. And obviously, from our perspective on these seminars, what we try to do is give people a very bite-sized chunk or two of what they should and shouldn't be doing, what's happened over the past 12 months. So a couple of things to sort of lead us off on, Jess. The last 12 months have been hugely challenging for the vast majority of both SME businesses and property investors. As a sort of trusted partner, as a legal partner to businesses, what are the most common areas that you found have been neglected by business owners that have tended to cause the most issues in the past 12 months?
I think probably the area that was most neglected really was disaster planning. Quite a lot of the businesses that I've spoken to, I mean, there's no way that any of us could have seen this coming, for sure. But to have a disaster recovery plan, or to have some sort of plan in place for if you can't access your premises, for if there's going to be, a big sort of change in the way that you have to deal with your customer base or your client base, having that planning in place would have given businesses a lot more confidence going forward. So from my perspective as a transactional property solicitor, actually the businesses that I'm dealing with are the ones that have put those things in place and the ones that did invest very heavily in things like technology before the pandemic. So those were the customers and the businesses who were actually able to still do the deals when the whole landscape changed for everybody. So not so much areas that were neglected, I can't really comment so much on that, but it's on the businesses and the actual things which businesses have put in place that have really served them well going forward is absolutely it's technology and planning ahead and having more than just a plan B or even a plan C to back those things up. So the businesses that came to me still with the deals that wanted to go ahead were the ones that had really good systems in place, really good technology that they could rely on, and a real sort of creative and growth mindset that they could go forward with. Which was really quite enjoyable to see at the time, actually, to still have businesses wanting to come forward and do those deals.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think certainly in the pandemic, you talked about a plan B, a plan C. I think we needed 19 plans to cope with COVID-19. But obviously during the pandemic, almost every business, of every size, received an awful lot of sort of government support. Now, obviously, as we start, and we fingers crossed hope to come out of this horrible situation and lockdown, that support now is obviously going to start going as we return to normal trading. Yeah. So if you had to if you sat with a business or you sat and doing a presentation, what are the one or two bits of advice you've got for businesses that they should focus on from a legal perspective moving forward?
Well, I think we can all say with absolute certainty that no business is emerging out of this whole situation in the same form as they were beforehand. So it comes down to everything from the way that we interact with our customers, from the way that we interact with our suppliers, even down to the actual places that we're doing businesses. Everything has fundamentally changed. So those legal things that we had in place beforehand have got to now reflect this new way of working. So the one thing I'm doing at the moment constantly with my clients is asking them to check their terms of business and their commercial contracts, and just to check that they still actually reflect the way that they are still doing business. Because it's really easy to forget that in the excitement of being able to reopen, that actually you've completely changed the terms of business between you and your customers. And if you need to rely on those terms of business at a later stage, then they're not going to help you if you haven't haven't taken the time to go back and review and update them. So that's definitely one practical thing that I'm telling clients at the moment to do, is to go back and check all of your terms of business and your commercial contracts to make sure that they reflect your new way of working. Other things that I've sort of recommended that clients should do is, especially if you've got commercial premises under a lease, is to, again, if you need to change the way that you are delivering your services to the public, are you going to have to make alterations to the premises? Are you at the moment making alterations to the premises? And if you are, have you checked that that's okay with the landlord? Have you checked under your lease that you may need to have consent? Have you checked what your break clauses are and whether you can actually get out of your leases when you need to? Or, what the rules are around you actually selling your lease to somebody else so that you can diversify and change your business again. So these things, I think it's definitely a time of reflection now. We've had a year, and I think it's a year today that we had the first lockdown. So now it is time to go and reflect back over that past year and go and see how much has changed, and then make sure that all of your legal structures that support your business are up to date.
Yeah, some excellent points there, Jess. And I think you're right, the period of reflection, the time to look and think, it's not what I used to know, it's what I need to know moving forward as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a manager, as a property investor. And I think there's some common themes that run right the way across. So certainly take your point in checking, in making sure, in plan before action, I think is probably the right way to say it. I think, as an entrepreneur myself, and as somebody who's, likes sometimes to rush ahead and do something, I think certainly stock taking your business and stock taking the important areas, whether it's legal advice, accountancy advice, trusted advisor advice from business growth people, it's a good time to do it. So
it is, yeah.
Moving on, Jess, if we're looking now, and it's a wonderful question, I apologise for putting you on the spot for it, but legal conveyancing on property transactions, I think if I use the terminology, has been frustratingly slow. For many people, and for all all parties connected with the process, be it lawyers, it's certainly not lawyer bashing, the banks, the funders, the clients, the vendors, but everybody, can you give us your thoughts on why it's taking so much longer to do a deal nowadays? And is there anything clients can do to try and reduce those delays slightly?
Okay, and it's a really loaded question. When I read this beforehand, I was like, oh my goodness, how on earth am I going to answer this? Because actually it's really complicated, and it's happened over a period of stages in my view. And being inside it and seeing it from the conveyancer's point of view, there have been some really clear stages that have led to this grinding, slow pace that conveyancing is going through. And I know you and I talked a little bit recently about it as well, and your words did kind of stick with me, that it is really frustrating that conveyancing has got to where it has. I think for the first part of the pandemic, a lot of it was the upheaval and the uncertainty of not knowing what was going to happen next. So a lot of firms may have needed to make furlough quite a lot of their fee earners. There was a massive shift in conveyancers having to work from home. Some firms were more prepared for that than others. So we had that, just like every other business, law firms are exactly the same. We had to shift all of our working practices whilst maintaining timelines for transactions, because it's transactional work. Alongside that, we then had the impact of all the funding institutions and the banks, who then had to completely redeploy their resources to other areas, and rightly so, because we had this huge amount of government support from through all the business loans and things like that the banking system had to facilitate, and they had to deliver, and they had to take priority because those businesses needed that money. But from their perspective, I did speak to quite a few people within the sort of banking industry, and at the time they said, look, it's the sheer volume of, we've had to redeploy, reduce resources of staff to other areas that are more important, which means that unfortunately those funding for those deals is going to take a lot longer because we've just taken a lot of the resource away. So I can remember back last summer being on hold to various different banks in excess of an hour and a half, trying to get through to security departments to sort out what would be minor issues, because emails just were being ignored. And it's just this, that was what was most important at the time, was redeploying that staff to somewhere else. But it all had a compound effect. So you had the working changes, then you had the banking system, then we had the issue with search providers and local authorities, because again, this is all starting to filter through. So your local authorities, their resources have also had to be severely cut again. And some local authorities were much better prepared than others. Some local authorities had everything available electronically, some didn't. And we're still feeling that now, I think. What was it up to before, Dave? I think we had quite a few. I think locally to us, we're sort of 20 working days, 25 working days for local authority searches to be turned around. And as you know, we need those in order for the conveyancing process to go through. And then more recently, I genuinely don't believe that many of us saw that next lockdown happening in January. Not to the extremity that was required, I don't think. I certainly didn't see schools shutting. I was like, no, it's not going to happen. I think I was in a bit of denial. Everyone's like, yeah, they're probably going to close schools. No, they're not going to close the schools. They're definitely not going to close the schools. And for conveyancers who have now had 9 months of having to already sort of work from home and juggle, and then having that period in the run-up to the SDLT holiday expiry, 31st of March, the pressure was immense for conveyancers from January. And then with the lockdown on top of that as well, it was like a pressure cooker, I've got to say. So if you ask me, how has it happened? I can tell you exactly how it's happened. And we all watched it happen as it went through. Fingers crossed now we are starting to come out of it. And definitely with the stamp duty extension and the staggering, that's obvious, that's already having an impact, I feel, anyway, within the conveyancing pressure. What can clients do to make it easier for their conveyancers? Clients, I'm very lucky. My clients are fabulous. They get information to me quickly when I ask for it. They clearly want things to move forward very, very quickly, which is brilliant. So talk to your conveyancers, and at the point of engagement, when you're engaging a solicitor, how responsive are they? Did you just send an email in asking for a quote? Have you actually spoken to the person who's dealing with your matter? Because I think it's really important to build that relationship from that point. And to find out what kind of service you're going to receive ultimately, I think long term, because it differs wildly.
Great. It's a very comprehensive answer, as I would expect from a legally qualified person. But you are right, Jess, it has been a pressure cooker. We've likened it in the past to, trying to feed, the 5,000 with 2 fish and 2 loaves of bread, and then 10,000 turn up. So I think there's been immense pressure on the whole system. But as you say, hopefully, fingers crossed, the kids are back at school, things are starting to ease off. Hopefully we are moving forward. And I think there's been some lessons learned on all sides. But I particularly take your point about, one thing we're passionate about is clearly stating out what you're looking for, talking to the individuals involved at your legal practices or wherever it might be, and say, now, actually, that person's got to deal with person B and person C. So it's making sure it all connects up. So there's some good tips there, Jess. And despite the last 12 months, due to COVID-19, the property market's been really buoyant, particularly in the southwest of England, which is where, we're both fortunate enough to live. With so many investment opportunities, improvements, developments, conversions to holiday lets, do you see this continuing over the course of the next year? And what do you think it's going to look like, really?
I personally, absolutely. I think all the good indicators are there. I'm really positive for at least the next 12 months, if not the next 2 years, really. I think Cornwall is now, isn't it the most searched for location for property?
Very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got lots to look forward to down in Cornwall. As I said, I have started to see a little bit of a slowdown in terms of new inquiries, but I think that's just because actually people feel a bit of breathing space from the SDLT holiday, but actually they're still very consistent, and I'm still getting lots of calls from agents as well who are, you know, trying to find out what my workload's like, how much capacity I've got, because they've got new stuff coming through. So all the different indicators are all showing that it is really positive in the southwest for sure, I think, for the next 12 months at least. You know, providing that we don't get any more unexpected turns in the pandemic, which none of us can, we can't completely discount. So as long as we're all still planning for what happens if we do get another lockdown. Personally, the property market has shown itself to be so robust throughout the pandemic in the southwest. You know, it surprised us all. None of us really saw just how busy it was going to be during what has been, and you know, a global crisis. None of us saw that coming at all. So I think, in the southwest, it's definitely positive going forward.
Well, that's great to hear, and it's good news. And I think it's something that's echoed, you know, right across the southwest, pretty much from Bristol down. You know, that there's an awful lot of focus on, you know, our hospitality businesses as they get back up and running. The wonderful world, I think, you know, one of the most searched terms has gone from epidemic to staycation now. So, you know, there's an awful lot of businesses right across the southwest that are doing really well.
Lots of my clients who have holiday lets are looking at full occupancy already through the summer, which is incredible. You know, they weren't really working to full occupancy before the pandemic, but now they're looking at full occupancy going through at least this season, if not beyond. People are even trying to book the following seasons. So it's like, I think staycation is absolutely here to stay, and the southwest is one of the best areas in the country to go, isn't it? So for the staycation. So I'm really looking forward to it. Although I'm going to have to keep using the back roads to get anywhere. Yeah. Yes,
no, absolutely. Don't put any more roadworks on us, Jess. We've got enough of those as it is. So just sort of finally, really, obviously, I think a lot of clients, when they approach us, talk to us about legal advisors, solicitor partners. Now, obviously, no matter what part of the country you're in, whether it's the southwest of England, London, a major city, or a rural area, there are many, many solicitors and legal advisors to choose from for all businesses and property investors. So what sort of advice or tips have you got for people when dealing with the legal profession, and what should they expect lawyers and solicitors and advisors to provide?
Okay, well, I don't know if I have a very popular opinion on this, but I do have quite a strong opinion on this, which is, I think, you know, solicitors, just like some other professionals, I think, have kind of been set apart in terms of judgments, I guess, on service levels and things like that in the past. Historically, lawyers have not been very good at marketing themselves. Indeed, we weren't allowed to for a very long time. So it isn't really in our nature. But that has changed. You know, it isn't changing. It has changed. It's definitely changed. And when you're choosing a legal advisor, treat it like you would anything else. Go and check their reviews, look them up, you know, see what they have and haven't done. I think the days of sort of using the same lawyer that your parents used or your grandparents used, those days have kind of gone now, because you can access lawyers from all over the country. It's not, you're not sort of restricted to your local area anymore. The other thing as well is that there are new types of lawyers that are jumping up. I mean, I myself am a consultant. The consultant status really was kind of, wasn't really very well utilised, I think, in the past. But now it's a whole new type of lawyer that is coming through. And there are firms that are popping up who are just consultant kind of based. So what this means is that you have lawyers who are in complete control of how they look after their clients and what level of service that they provide. They're not confined to the sort of traditional firm office hours or restrictions in that way. So it's really interesting to see. So I think when you're choosing your lawyer, speak to them, get to know them, check out their reviews, because we're just as vulnerable to that now, I think, as any other business type, and rightly so we should be. I think those are, what would you think, Dave? What would you look for when you're looking for a lawyer?
I think one of the things that we've talked about with clients whenever we're asked the question is find somebody that you're comfortable with, find somebody who is accessible.
Yes.
And also find somebody that someone else that you know think is great. Yeah. And it's that back to that, and we've seen it right through the pandemic. It's gone through funding, accountancy, law, everywhere, where that personal recommendation, I dealt with Jess Cornish, she was great, she did this for me, is often much more important to somebody than, yeah, but is she the cheapest? Because I think the one thing people have really, really sort of switched back onto is it isn't about the most competitive price, it's about the best value for money. So, we never break chains of command. If somebody's absolutely delighted with their lawyer, that's perfect. We'll happily deal with them. We all do is deal with lawyers by default because it's our client's choice. It isn't our choice. But I think most people now are looking for, I want accessibility and availability. Unfortunately, that can stretch into non-working hours if you're not careful. But it is somebody saying, I need somebody who's going to be responsive, someone who's going to look after my best interests, and most importantly, complete this deal in a satisfactory manner.
Yeah.
So I think you are right. I think, the tips we always give to people is, if you've got somebody who a good number of people can happily recommend, it's a great starting point. But also when you're speaking with a lawyer or any other professional, to sit there and say, if we do move forward with this transaction, have you actually got the time to deal with it at the moment, or are you stacked out? Because sometimes an honest, I'd love to deal with you, but my workload at the moment precludes me from, if you want it done by next Thursday, I'm probably not going to be able to do it. Is equally as important as anything else. So now I think you're right, Jess, there's some good, very sensible advice there. It's certainly the way lawyers are perceived is changing. The way solicitors are being viewed is changing. Like all of us, you're in the public domain where, there are reviews, there are, feedback forms and websites. So I think, from our perspective, it's, as we always say, choose your advisors wisely and make sure you're comfortable with your advisor. Because if you've got those two questions answered, you'll pretty much be on to a winner.